I'd like to welcome you all to our monitoring and evaluation webinar. And with me, we are joined today by Jen Rubli. And I'm going to introduce Jen, and then she's going to take over the session. This is going to be a learning opportunity for you also. I'm hoping that you with your pen and papers and ready to learn. So I'm just going to introduce Jen. Jen is an expert in the menstrual health sector with 10 years experience in the design, implementation, and analysis of monitoring, evaluation, and learning systems and research projects in East Africa. She's highly skilled in technical research skills and has demonstrated this by leading on several large-scale projects in Tanzania and supporting other organizations. She has a focus on improving accessibility of research findings for SMOs, translation of research and policy to practice, and developing accessibility, high-quality monitoring and evaluation learning resources and tools for low-resource context. So that's a little bit about Jen. And yeah, Jen, the floor is yours. Karibu.
Sante. So yes, that was a glowing introduction. So the next, 2 hours, I think, 4.5, 2 hours, it's going to be all about monitoring, evaluation, and learning, hopefully in a very practical way that you can take some of these things back with you, apply them, you get something out of this, all that fun stuff. As in my bio, like monitoring, evaluation, and learning is often very inaccessible, especially to small organizations. And this is one way that we're trying to change that because it doesn't have to be. Yeah, so basically I'm going to make you all work. I will explain things and then you will work. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to ask. I can't see the chat box, but I think Vincent is monitoring that. So like jump in at any time if I need to explain something, clarify, whatever. Yeah, all right, let's do this. So, oh, can I do this? This is an even better question. Yeah, so just basically what we're going to go through, this session is sort of a formative building block session. So we're going to talk about, what exactly is monitoring, evaluation, and learning, why you should care, and why you should not be scared of it. And then go through the basic components that will then allow you to build your framework, hopefully in the next session. That's the idea. We'll see how time goes. So to start with, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, MEL, it's sometimes called M&E. More recently, we like to add the L in there for learning. So it's MEL or MEL. So sort of, what is it? Why do I care? If anybody has any ideas, feel free to pop them in the chat, throw them out there, see what you think of it. Anybody have any idea what it is or why you should care about it in any way, shape, or form? Come on, I said I was going to make you work. No? Even one idea of what it might be? There's got to be someone in this webinar who knows what it is. No? Fine then. Be that way. I'll get you later. So, what is it?
Here we have one from Sally.
Oh, yes. Go, go, go.
And he says a way to monitor the efficacy of programs against goals and objectives.
That sounds like straight out of a textbook. Geez. It's pretty accurate. Yeah. So this is a big definition. We're going to break it down, I promise. So system at the organizational project level, right, encompasses adaptable frameworks for processes, best practices, tools, and indicators to monitor progress and activities, assess achievement of results, and evaluate impact. Lots in there. So just to break it down a little, MEL can happen at different levels. So it can be at the project level, it can be at the organizational level. Obviously, the project level should be contributing to the organizational level. The framework, there's got to be some sort of theory behind what you're doing, some evidence that the project, that what you're doing will bring about certain results or incomes. Get into that too. Adaptable. It needs to be adaptable because things don't always go as planned. I think we all know that. And also we learn and we do better. And so that when things change or don't work, you're not stuck. You can adapt and you can change direction. You can do better. The process is sort of how you're doing the project. The activities is what you're doing. And then the tools and indicators is how you're measuring that. So now it hopefully makes a little bit more sense in terms of the definition of it. So why are we doing it? What's the point? Does anybody have any thoughts? Having gone through this definition, does anybody have any thoughts on why we're doing it and what the point of doing it is? There's lots of reasons to do it. Who's got something?
Eric, I think let me respond to Eric. Eric, we can see your point. The chat is disabled, but maybe you can type your answer in here and then we'll answer. And then Tobias, you had your hand up, but you can also type in here on the Q&A section so that we can be able to answer.
Yes, please put comments in here. So does anybody, having gone through this definition or just with your own experience, because clearly at least one person here knows about monitoring and evaluation. So why do we do it?
We have Tobias and Eric respond. Tobias says helps us know where we are. And Eric says why M&E, tracking progress at program level.
Absolutely. Very true.
We also have Salim, improve your programs, highlight your work to donors.
Both of these are also very important. We all need money. All right, great. Yes, that's quite accurate, all of these. So look, the first one right there, money. We need money. The way you get money and you get more money and you keep getting money is by having M&E that demonstrates that what you're doing is working and that you are achieving good things. We all know that donors and funders have a lot of obligations around reporting. Scaling up, it's pretty hard to scale up if you can't demonstrate that you know what you're doing and it's working. Demonstrating your worth, which goes back to one of the comments as well, the value added of your program or project over others, what's already existing in the sector. Government reporting and relationships. A lot of, especially smaller, well, a lot of NGOs just in general, you know, whether it's very small at more of a local level or towards a more national level, you are reporting to governments, you need their cooperation. You do that by demonstrating results. Responsibility to program participants and communities. So there's a responsibility to the people with whom you're working to demonstrate that, you know, to feed back and report to them, to show what you're doing and to show that what you're doing is working, because otherwise it's not really fair. Doing better, because we can always do better. We can always learn. We can always be smarter, more efficient. Keep on track. And that goes back to one of the comments as well. Like, are we doing it the way we said we were doing it? Are we on time? Are we behind? Did we do everything that we're supposed to do? And then as an organization, to know your own worth, this can be really hard. What we do can be really hard and we can get very exhausted and demoralized. And just having that data coming back that says, no, what you're doing is actually worthwhile, that's just good for us in doing our work to keep doing it and to get some motivation to keep doing it. So, monitoring versus evaluation. I'm making you work again. Does anybody have an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about monitoring versus when we're talking about evaluating? Any thoughts, ideas? I know some of you know this.
Dr. Kili has written monitoring, checking progress against our plans.
Very well said. Yes, exactly.
Eric says monitoring equals continuous.
Yes, we have some experts in this webinar here. Cool. Anyone else want to say something about evaluating maybe? Oh, okay.
Evaluation equals periodic. That's from Eric. And then Dr. Kili says evaluation is assessing. And
All
then
very
let's say
true.
evaluation is POT.
All right, so some of you really don't need me here. So, monitoring, this was just said, continuous. It's tracking, it's continuous. To put it into sort of monitoring, evaluation, learning terms, it's focusing on inputs, activities, and outputs. So what you're doing and what is resulting directly from what you do. There's a very strong overlap with project management, program monitoring sort of thing, because that's very much what it is. So you're looking at questions like, are we on track? Are we doing things right? What have we learned? Evaluation, you're looking down the road, usually after the program. So you're looking at any impact you may have had. It is periodic, as was also said. Usually there's a baseline involved. You may or may not have a midpoint, depends on your project, your funding, that sort of thing. But it's definitely afterwards, and usually quite a bit afterwards as well. It's a more in-depth analysis of data, and it's sort of looking at more overall achievement, learning, informing future projects. And it's asking more questions like, have we done the right thing? And how can we do better? And it's looking at overall change that might have occurred, any impact that you might have had as an organization or as a project. So
Jen,
basically,
there's something
yeah.
that Charles has written. Evaluation is a systemic process limited in time of collecting and analyzing information.
That is fairly accurate, yes. So we monitor our day-to-day activities to track what's being done, how much, where, etc. We're evaluating the outcomes and the impact to ensure we're achieving what we want to do and like what sort of change did we achieve. And then we're providing constant feedback to help us do better, essentially. So now, am I right? It's your turn. I want you to take like 2 minutes. And this is work that you're doing for your organization now or your project. And think about what sorts of things in your work you should be monitoring and what sorts of things you should be evaluating. And we'll just take a few minutes to do that, okay? Let me know if you have any questions. And after, I'll ask for a few examples to share as well. But now this is your job and this is what you're doing, you know, to sort of work on your own MEL system, okay? Make sense?
Jen, Charles, Eric missed the last part. Could you kindly repeat?
Oh, this bit.
I think so. The last part.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, an MEL system is monitoring of day-to-day activities to track what's being done, how much, where, that sort of thing. Evaluation is looking at outcomes and impact to make sure we're achieving what we wanted to and what sort of change we actually did achieve. And then the learning is sort of the constant feedback to help us do better. Yeah. And so now this is your job. All of you take like 5 minutes and think about this. If there's several of you from the same organization, you can work together on it. Otherwise, you can do your own thing and share it with your organization after. Okay? Make sense? Okay, I'm assuming it does. I will answer any questions. Okay, about 2 minutes. If anybody has any questions, let me know. Okay, how's everybody doing on this? Do you think did we get some things? And would anybody like to share what they, as an organization, might be monitoring or evaluating? Yes, I'm asking you to be interactive and share your work. Anybody? Someone be brave. Give me like one example. What is your organization or your project or your program monitoring? What's your organization evaluating? Or what would you like to? Because I know what you can do can be very different from what you would like to do. Seeing some things in both the Q&A and the chat. Okay. That's good. I think, okay, so I should probably clarify when I was asking you to do this, I meant not sort of the theory, I meant like with your project, if you have like a gender project and you're working with girls' clubs at schools, for example, what are you monitoring? What are you evaluating? So for your specific work, okay, and you don't have to share. This is just so like you're getting an idea and you're starting to think about it in terms of building your own system. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, I am going to. Okay, I think I'll move on to the next bit. So just keep thinking about this. And this is something that also you can keep working on and also doing with the entire organization as well. I realize probably this is individuals from an organization that are joining the training. So wait, next slide. Okay, so changing direction slightly. We're going to now basically talk about the components of an MEL system so that you will be in a place, and I'm going to make you work, still making you work, basically to get you to a place where you've thought all of this through and can start putting it together into sort of an organized framework. So first thing is inputs and resources. What do you need to make this project happen? What is required? And here we're talking about everything. Like in order to do the work you do, what do you need to have available? So we're talking things like people, staff, we're talking about money, salaries, we're talking about like working laptops. In Tanzania, we're talking a lot about power. Vehicles, transport, do we need permissions from certain people? Basically everything that you need to make a project happen, to make an organization work. The activities is then hopefully fairly self-explanatory. It's what you're doing. Step by step, break it down. What are you doing with those resources? What actions will achieve the change you're trying to achieve? And the outputs is a direct result of those activities. It's a unit of completion. It's a tick. It's very much your monitoring. It's like we plan to do A, B, C, D, and we did it. We almost did it. We didn't do it. So you're looking at number of attendees, number of workshops, sort of how you're measuring things.
Jen,
then we're getting, oh, yes.
I just want to clarify because there are some partners who are asking whether they can speak. I just want to let them know that this is a webinar, so you cannot speak, only the panelists can. And so we'd encourage you to type all your thoughts on the Q&A or the chat, because unfortunately the Zoom webinar does not allow participants to speak. I've seen a couple of hands up, but let's just type in our thoughts and activities here.
Okay. So yeah, I'm just taking a quick look at the Q&A in the chat. I can either be looking at my screen or I can be looking at but I've seen a few good comments around what you're monitoring or evaluating, or a comment about no evaluation at this point. That's fine, that's normal. So yeah, some good comments here. So great, thanks. Feel free to keep sharing so it's written down, but do make sure that you have it written down for yourself and your organization as well. Okay, so now we're sort of moving into the outcomes, which is basically changes that you're seeing. And they're generally divided into short, medium, and long-term. Long-term can also be impact. It depends on, the funder, your own point of view, how you want to be doing that. So short-term is pretty right away, like right after you've done the workshop, you've implemented the program, whatever. These are changes that you see from usually about 0 to 3 months. And it's changes in capacity, like ability to do something. It's changes in access to something. It's improved knowledge. I'm saying improved because we're hoping that there's improvement. So improved knowledge or skills. Medium-term outcomes are basically in like 3 to 6, 3 to 9 months. They're a bit longer term. Often you kind of see these starting to happen around the end of a program. So it tends to be changes in behaviors and practices and performance, those sorts of things, because that doesn't happen right away. That is not a short-term thing. That takes a while to develop. And then your long-term or your impact is what you usually see at least a year after the project, or even longer. Some things are 5 years. It's something that is not often measured, especially with smaller organizations and projects, because there just isn't enough funding to plan, a 2-year evaluation down the road. But it's, it's those larger scale things. It's those goals that you're working towards. It's, contributing to why you're doing this program in the first place. And it's often around like development goals, for like your government policies, the SDGs, that sort of thing. Come on, go here. Okay. So we're going to get back into the working where I'm asking you to do things. There's a lot that goes into building sort of a theory of change or monitoring evaluation framework. And it's not just like, we're doing this, we're measuring that, and we have achieved these things. There's a lot that I'm going to make you think about that basically makes your entire system better. So the first thing is assumptions. Now, we all have them. Some of them are conscious, some are unconscious beliefs about how the world works, things that we believe are true. They're beliefs about existing conditions that actually may affect how we design our program or how activities lead to results. So it's really, really, because often we're sort of designing our programs or organizations around these, it's really, really important that we identify them and make them explicit so that we can identify if there are any flaws in the reasoning of them. They're based on, they're both individual and organizational. So they can be based on evidence, and they are based on evidence, on religion, on culture, on experience, on all these things. And that can be, a lot of it is, social belief systems, things around gender and women's or men's roles are this, things around the role of religion. These are all sort of assumptions that we have. And so it's really important that we understand whether we have them. Because, for example, I'll give an example from the menstrual sector, which is where I'm from, for many, many years, and it persists. basically we assumed that girls were dropping out and missing school because they didn't have menstrual products, specifically disposable pads. So if we gave girls pads, disposable pads, they would stay in school. Fair enough. Might be true. The only problem is lots and lots and lots of money. Well, lots because there wasn't actually lots, but like all the funding, which was not much, went to programs that specifically gave pads to girls in school. And it turns out that doesn't work very well. Girls miss school for many reasons. Menstruation is one of them, and supplying disposable pads it helps, but school attendance and dropout are actually completely shit measures. And so no program has ever really showed improved attendance based on this. And yet tons of money was put into that. And there are still programs from like UNICEF, for example. I hope there's no one from UNICEF on this call, who think that give girls pads, they don't drop out of school. And that's that's a really basic example of more of a program assumption, but why it's so important to identify this so that you don't keep doing something that isn't working. We're fighting enough for funding as it is. We don't need to be fighting and putting so much effort into things that don't work. So this is now another activity for you. And again, you can share, but I want you to just be, doing this on your own. Vincent told you to have your pen and paper ready. And so just think about, sorry, yeah.
Some good news. We've figured out how we can allow them to speak. So in the next session, as we move on to the next part, as you answer these questions, if you want to speak, just raise your hand and Wambui will let you in as a panelist, and then you can give your feedback and ideas, and then yeah. So just raise your hand if you need to say something, and we'll let you in.
Great. That will be fun. I will be calling on people.
Exactly,
so,
yes.
For this one, this is again an activity that you're going to do. I want you to think about what are your organizational assumptions? What are you, and these are just some questions to sort of get you thinking about the assumptions that you have in terms of an organization and the programs that you're doing. So I'm not saying that you have to go through and answer each one of these, just different ways of thinking about assumptions, okay? So like, what are your organizational assumptions? What are you basing your programming on? What are you taking to be true or fact in your context? How do you know this? Has it been tested? What has been tested? And really importantly, and this is what comes afterwards, is what assumptions is your program or your organization actually built on? And if those assumptions are not true, you need to change everything, okay? So just, yeah, we'll take 5 to 7 minutes. I am timing all of this. Think about this. I'll check in the chat and Q&A if people have any questions about what I'm asking you to do here, and just write this down for you as an organization. Think through it, okay? Makes sense? another 2 minutes, I think. I'm assuming everyone is getting on really well and thinking about this and writing some things down. Feel free to start sharing anything as well. And like Vincent said, you can also speak now. You will be allowed to speak.
We'd encourage them to speak, actually.
Okay, anyone feel like sharing? Just short and sweet, and I don't need your whole list. Just, you can give me one organizational or personal assumption.
Hello. I think I can go first. And my name is Eric. I work with Our Lady of Perpetual Support based in Kisumu. So in our programming or in our M&D system, one of the things that we normally assume is that there will be funding available throughout the entire project. But we make plans that are timed. So what we normally do, assume that there will be money available throughout the project period. And so the next thing is the process. The processes, that is programmatic processes, will be smooth. Nothing will happen to negatively affect delivery of services within what we are set to achieve with the entire project period. I think I can only share those two. I can leave the floor to other people also to share. Thank you so much.
Great, yeah. If there's one other person to just keep it short and sweet, or else we can move on.
Dr. Kelly, kindly raise your hand so that we can let you in. Okay. Yes, you can now unmute yourself and give your comments.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so at Queen Elizabeth Academy, we're dealing with the school, educating boys and girls from our community. One of the assumptions is that girls are lagging behind the education system because of many factors, as one has been mentioned, because of the hygienic towels, they are lacking them, and it is barring them from attending school. Different programs, different charities have donated, and thanks to them, and girls now can go to school happily. But there are equally important factors as well, which are still barring girls from attending school. And one of them is the tradition and the culture in that community, that girls are the ones who are supposed to help in domestic chores. And so in some days they're allowed to go to school, and some days they're not allowed to go because they have to help with the farming and cooking and so forth. And so for us, we thought that maybe having a hostel or a dormitory, it is going to help the girls stay in school and solve the problem. So I think we are working on that, and it is working actually.
Yeah, and that's actually a good example of a few different types of assumptions where you have one that, you know, girls are missing school for these reasons, and there is research on some of that. And so we know that, you know, menstruation, for example, is one reason. There are many others. What was mentioned about, you know, their contribution to the housework is also something that has been researched and demonstrated. And so those are really sound assumptions to sort of base your programming on. And then, for example, building a safe house. Like I cannot speak to whether that has been research tested or not, but that's a really good example of different sorts of assumptions versus, you know, sort of this is the problem and we're assuming this is the problem and we're assuming that this will help solve that problem. All right, great. Moving on. So stakeholders. So stakeholders, the next thing I'm going to make you think about is basically anybody who's involved or somehow affected in some way, in any way, by the work you are doing. And from the planning stage, it's really important that they be identified. Most grant applications ask you about stakeholders in some way, shape, or form. They're categorized in different ways. When you're thinking about it, it's categorized in different ways depending on the funder, which is really annoying because if you are writing grants, you may need to, you know, rearrange them in different ways and rethink it a little bit. Sort of like primary, secondary, tertiary, direct, indirect, all that sort of thing. But luckily, once you've thought through who your stakeholders are and how they're connected, it becomes a bit easier to classify them and categorize them in different ways. And so these stakeholders include, you know, yourself, your organization as people doing the program, funders and government, the community, program participants or beneficiaries, families, supplies, contractors. It's everyone who, you know, is somehow involved, somehow has a stake, is somehow affected by your organization or your project. It can be, you know, depending on what you're doing. If you're, you know, a very specialized organization, it may be a very niche group, especially of sort of primary stakeholders. So primary or direct stakeholders are usually your participants or your beneficiaries. And then indirect will be pretty much everyone else. Secondary, if we're talking about that, will be like people related to the primary one who also, there's a knock-on effect. So for example, if you're doing a project on girls in school, probably families will somehow be secondary stakeholders. And then tertiary is often like funders, governments, that sort of thing. So what you're going to get to do now, same thing, keep making you work, told you. So I'm going to give you like 5 minutes again to think about who are your organizational or program stakeholders. So who matters, who is affected by your work, and who can affect your work. Who is it important to have on board? So yeah, I'll give you about 5 minutes. Feel free to share as you go along as well in the chat or Q&A, ask if you have any questions, and then we'll have like 1 or 2 people share some small quick examples after that as well. Okay. All right, go work, think. Okay, another 2 minutes. Feel free to share some examples as well if you want. Okay, I lied, 1 minute. All right, anybody feel like sharing? You doesn't need to be the whole list, just some examples. Who are some of your stakeholders? Come on. Ooh, we have some things happening. Okay. Yes, I see some good things in the chat and the Q&A.
Eric also is here. Eric, maybe you can give a point.
Yep.
Thank you, Vincent. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. So this now, some of our stakeholders include our suppliers and vendors, also include our allies and collaborators, the organizations with which we operate in the same location. We have what we are doing similar or not similar, but at least we are operating in the same location. The employees, our beneficiaries, or project participants, the community where we work, those are our stakeholders, including also our donors, or funders, for example. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good example. And in I think the Q&A in the chat, we also had some good examples. And so it can, I think as we saw, it's often, it's our program participants, it's the communities that we work, can also be very specific individuals. Like it is, this government official, for example, kind of thing, depending on, what you're doing and how your NGO is positioned, the relationships that you have. Okay, excellent. Now.
Dr. Kelly would like to share.
Oh,
would you kindly
sure.
raise your hand? Oh, she's here.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So in our school, we're dealing with students, and they're the most important stakeholders, including their parents or guardians. And we have got to the community because the school is a community school. So we have the community in forefront, and we have got volunteers who are volunteering to work at our school. We have got the teacher. We have got the government as well, because the government is the one which registered the school and allowing it to work formally as a registered school in United Republic of Tanzania. And we have got also the education officials from world level to district level, regional level, and national level as well. All of these are our stakeholders.
Yes. Very true. Yeah. And it's super important to identify all of them as well, because they can affect your work or your ability to do your work, especially more, regulatory ones, one could say, like, around governments and getting permissions to do things. So in talking about that, we're going to talk about a specific group of stakeholders that are called gatekeepers. Now, these are people who have influence or decision-making power over you as an organization, the work you do, the access you get to people. this can be positive or negative, but basically it's people that you need to have on board in order to do your work. For example, if you're working in schools, especially like if you're working in government schools, you need different levels of permission from different levels of government to go in there. Probably need parents. You definitely need the headmaster. They're basically people who can decide whether or not you get in or are allowed to do your work. And you've already probably thought of some of these people, but I'm just going to take it one step further, and we'll have another few minutes now to basically think about the gatekeepers within your organization and your work, that you need them on board. You need to get permissions from them. They need to be informed, reported to. Basically, if you don't have them on board, you're not going to be able to work with that particular area or that group of people. So just take another few minutes. Some were already mentioned previously, but think about who specifically, in terms of your stakeholders, are gatekeepers. So we'll just take maybe 3 minutes for that, because you've already done some of the work last time. Yay. And let me know if any questions, obviously. Okay, anybody want to share specifically some gatekeepers that they have? And it can be very specific as well. It can be like, well, maybe you don't want to, but literally a name of a person. Anyone feel like sharing? Who hasn't shared yet? Oh.
Tobias, you can unmute yourself.
Yes. Thank you, Vincent. Yeah, at Tropical Focus, some of the gatekeepers that we anticipate may or are already involved include supermarkets, because we intend to send some to sell our fresh produce and processed produce to supermarkets, to hotels, and fresh produce markets. And we feel that they can be gatekeepers. Also, we are currently establishing a school, which is a primary, secondary, the primary or junior secondary in Kenya. And we feel that the registration, the government licensing authority, school registration authority may be a gatekeeper.
Yeah, That's very true. And gatekeepers are very often sort of government regulatory bodies. And so, for example, you're selling your produce in supermarkets. I don't know, but if you need any sort of approvals or clearances to, you know, show that your produce is safe and hygienic and all that stuff and not contaminated, that's also usually a gatekeeper. Cool. Right. Anyone else? Or are we going to move on here? Okay.
I can try.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Arnington is my name. Sorry, I joined late. Arnington from One Vibe Africa. And for the case of the non-governmentals, I think our primary gatekeeper is the NGO board. They keep us on check and ensure
That's
that
unfortunate.
we work in accordance to the regulations that have been put in place. And also, we always have to submit our returns annually. So with that being said, I think they are our main primary gatekeepers, ensuring that we are on course at all times.
Well, yeah, for sure. Oh, look, we already did it. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. Talk a little bit about risk mitigation. So risk mitigation happens at two levels. You have the program and the organization, and then you have the participant. And it's important to think about both. So for the program or the organization, it's basic, and this is also usually something that you have to, especially as you get into bigger grants like stakeholder, it's stuff that you're going to have to think through and answer questions on how you've thought about it. So at the program or organization level, it's things that have the potential to affect the project, the organizational success. It can be internal or external. So it can be something to do with your organization or your project itself. For example, it can go back to your assumptions. And for example, if you are testing a certain assumption or you've built your project around a certain assumption and that assumption is wrong, that's a risk. It can also be external, which is what we tend to think about more quickly, outside things that we have less control over. They can be foreseen and unforeseen, and typically in grants, and also just a really good practice is to think through as many as you can, and then think about your mitigation strategies. Some things are really obvious, like rainy season. You're not going to be able to access certain places. It's going to delay things. And so you plan around, it's going to happen, it's coming, you plan around it. Getting a stamp on a letter of approval. We all know how long that can take. So you build in that extra time that is probably going to be required to get that stamp. Unforeseen stuff, I mean, as you get more experienced, you can, there's less and less unforeseen stuff. But, something like COVID, as much as like epidemiologists and communicable disease specialists were like, there's a pandemic coming, that it would be COVID and it would hit, 2019, 2020, and it would kind of shut the world down. That was a little bit unforeseen. And those tend to be a lot harder to plan for. They also tend to have a much higher impact on your organization, on your work. I mean, that has changed everything for a lot of people. They typically fall into categories like funding, context, organizational, and usually in grant applications, and also just as a good practice, which is what you're going to do next, obviously, because I keep making you do it all. So you're going to think about categorizing it as well in terms of like what is, what is low risk, what is medium risk, what is high risk. We'll go over that in a sec. Then in terms of the participant, we're looking at unintended harms usually that can befall a participant as a result of taking part in the project or the program. These risks are generally much higher when you're dealing with marginalized groups or sensitive taboo issues. For example, adolescent pregnancy, HIV, sex workers, all that thing. And it can be for the worker, for the team as well, in terms of, you know, if somebody is seen with your organization, it is assumed that, for example, if they are seen with you, it is assumed they are HIV positive. And because of the stigma around HIV, that could put them at risk. So it's things like that. These can be a bit harder, and sometimes you only come to see these after experience, which is unfortunate. But this is where a lot of research becomes very important. So when you have access to research, to things that are already published, this is something that as a sector, research really takes into account, and you have to think about sort of the ethics. It falls under ethics in research, risks and harms, and how you're going to mitigate those. And so as much as you're able to do research on, you know, types of populations and types of programs, that can help you foresee some of these, as well as have some mitigation strategies in place. And so it's basically thinking about how you're going to minimize the risk of any given event happening, and then how you will deal with it if it does happen. What's your strategy to manage that? What? No, this is not what I wanted. There we go. Okay. And so just now I'm going to ask you to do this for yourself, obviously, in terms of your organization or your project. And just think about it also in terms of these categories here. So your low risk stuff it's not a serious problem. It's easily anticipated and or mitigated. And I know I gave this example earlier, but like rainy season. You know it's coming, you know-ish when it's coming, you know how to plan around it and what things are going to usually happen during rainy season. Medium, it could cause a problem even if you do anticipate it and plan for it. It could result in delays or affect the outcome, even if you do plan for it. And so those are, you know, slightly more serious things. And then the last one is high risk, which is, it's a very serious problem and could basically, you know, result in failure. And it just, you know, whatever you're doing will not work. So yeah, now we're going to take another, maybe I'll give you a few extra minutes, like 6 minutes or so, to just think about these in your program. And I know we're not going to get, you're not going to get through all of this. So this is something that I will tell you to do on your own time afterwards. Maybe, you know, for those people for whom it's after work hours tomorrow during work hours, but sit down with your team and think about these different risks that might be happening, and think about, make a nice little table of the risk, the level, and your solution, how you will minimize that risk, okay? So yeah, we'll take a few minutes now, and then I will be asking you to share, and then we will move on. Yeah, and obviously any questions, feel free to share in the chat or the Q&A as well. Okay, no 1 minute or 2 minute warning this time. Sorry, everyone. Time is always an issue. This is also something, as I said, you get to keep doing on your own. This is your homework. You're back in school. So that being said, does anybody want to share just one example of a risk, either participant or program risk, and that you have, and maybe talk briefly about any mitigation as well? Chat, Q&A, and if anyone hasn't spoken yet, I want everyone to speak. Yes, I'm that person. Somebody share something.
Eric, you can give your comments.
Dr. Vincent, I'm going to give an example that is related to our context. So one of the things that we have experienced before is safeguarding risks, basically because of the nature of the beneficiaries of all program participants that we have in our program. The level is low to medium, and the mitigation we've decided as an organization to put in place comprehensive safeguarding policy and procedures to guide or to protect our beneficiaries as well as the staff. Another risk area is legal suit due to our operations. We might step on the wrong foot, and somebody might take us to court. And the risk level is low, and the mitigation, as an organization, we have decided to have in place what we call an organizational liability insurance, which can be very handy in case somebody takes the organization to court due to operational negligence and other things. And then also we have the possibility of staff injuries, especially in the line of duty. Risk level, in our case, it is low. Then mitigation is installation of safety procedures and protocols, as well as also taking insurance to protect the student. Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, and that's a good example of a few mitigation strategies, which includes policies, sort of safeguarding, especially like child safeguarding, financial policies, insurances that you may be in place to take out. So that's really important as well in thinking about it. And again, as you grow as an organization or larger grants, they're going to ask you for your policies that you do have in place. I mean, sexual harassment is always a big one. Anyone who works with children or people or minors under 18, you'll need a child safeguarding, that sort of thing. There were also a few comments that I thought were really good. They were sort of gatekeepers and risk mitigation, but it showed how important it is to frame your, especially if you're writing a grant application, if you're like, oh, my country is super corrupt and it's impossible to get anything done. They're going to, if they get to that point on your grant application, they're going to wonder why you're even applying. So how you frame your risks and how you're positioning yourself, for example, as an expert who knows how to operate within this context and turning that risk, it's like, yes, this is a very big risk, but we have been operating in this context for, I don't know how many years. We have successfully implemented these programs. That becomes a very valuable point to reframe things and say, yes, it's an issue. Yes, it's a risk, but we have experience in this and we have dealt with this previously. So that's important to think about as well. Okay, moving on. So you may remember that we talked briefly about this. You saw this slide, your inputs, your activities, your outputs. I want you to keep in mind outputs here. See this pretty little thing around it's the direct results of activities, a unit of completion. And then we're going, this next slide, you also saw it. I hope your memories are still working. We're going to look specifically at the short-term outcomes here, but outcomes in general, and its results or changes that are seen. So this is a very important point here. Outputs versus outcomes. And this may be a little bit nerdy, but whatever. They are not the same. And please, after this session, nobody will ever confuse them ever again because they are not the same. So I think there are some experts in this room who already might know what the difference is. So I'm just going to jump right in because I'm also conscious of time. So outputs, that's basically a unit of completed work. Nothing more, nothing less. It's the number of meetings you held. It's your attendance list. It's the trainings completed. It has no meaning attached to it. Because you did a training does not mean that the training was good or resulted in improved knowledge or better skills or anything like that. All it means is that you did this training. Yay, you did it, but it doesn't mean anything yet. So when you're talking about impact sort of level, when you're talking about things that you've achieved, or when you're talking about any sort of change, output is not change. It is simply work that is done. Not to underplay that, because obviously doing stuff is like that takes a lot of work. But it is not a change. It is not an outcome. So your outcome is a result from the output. So that's where you get like your changes, the things that you're trying to achieve, right? That's you're getting improved knowledge. You have a workshop and there's people's skills in a certain area get better. They improve their knowledge, they change their behavior. And so that's where you get sort of in terms of your reporting, that's where you get more towards your impact. It's like there are changes. Outputs, it's just that you did it. You get to tick it off. Hopefully you have like some fun thing where you can be like, I did it, yes. But it doesn't mean anything because just doing a training does not mean that people listened, people cared, it was good, people learned anything. Obviously, in terms of this here, we're going to say that you learned things, but I'm just making that assumption. So I think this will probably be our last little thing for tonight. Vincent can cut me off when I run out of time, but I want you to think about in terms of your own organization, the work that you're doing. What are your outputs and what are your outcomes? And obviously these outcomes, you know, that can be anything. That can be like, oh, people learned something. That can be like, oh, we're working towards gender equality. So the outcome side is very big, but I just want you to think specifically in terms of the work you're doing. We'll just have a few minutes to talk about, to think through what are your outputs and what are your outcomes in your programming, okay? So yeah, I'll give you about 5 minutes, maybe, unless Vincent cuts me off. And then we'll do a little bit of sharing.
Yeah, I think we can wind up with these.
Okay, sounds good. All right, last bit of work you're going to have to do tonight, everybody, or this morning for some of you as well. Okay, I'll give you another minute or so. And again, this is probably something that won't be done just right now. You're gonna have to work harder at it. Homework. Okay, anyone feel like sharing? We've had a few in the Q&A that were quite good examples, so you'll have to live up to that. No pressure. But anybody feel like sharing who hasn't yet on this question? No one? Are we all exhausted? Some of you are just starting your day. Come on now. Okay, that's fine. So there were a few examples in the Q&A that were actually really good because they sort of showed how looking at that. No, that I'm lying. I'm confusing
We
things.
have one
Nope.
hand raised.
Oh, great.
Charles, you can unmute yourself. I've also seen David. I don't know. Yeah. David, you can go next. Charles, unmute yourself.
Okay. Vinny, I'm one of those who are like so exhausted today.
Pole.
Asante. But if I would want to say, like if I would want to explain like some of the outputs and outcome of like one of the programs that we have, I would want to use like the Bintietu program, that is like more about like the sexual reproductive health, education and rights. And an example of an output would be like maybe like let me just try to read it. Like 10 to 14-year girls and their families have a better access to affordable and self-made reusable sanitary pads. Another like output, I would say maybe I would say like maybe 800 girls from age 10 to 14 years and their families have improved knowledge and awareness of puberty and girls sanitary pads delivery through like the Bintietu project in the targeted schools and communities. So that I would say is is the two like statements I could say I would put them in the outputs. And for the outcome, I would say the first one sentence I would say improved learning outcomes in puberty, menstruation, and expanded availability of sanitary pads to girls in school. Another statement would be like improved sense of like self-esteem and confidence amongst 10 to 14-year-old girls in relation to feeling safe and secure to attend schools regularly. So that would follow and would fall under outcomes statement.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to challenge you now because that's what I do. So the things that you put under the outputs, why are they under the outputs, Charles? Yes. What made you put them as outputs instead of outcomes?
Well, I would say like for me, like outcome, first of all, I would say they are like more of like they are kind of like, I don't know if I say like these are like the long-term like result of like uh the intervention that we've been doing. And so the outcome would be a little bit opposite, or like it's not like a long term, it can be like a short term sort of a thing. But that's what I think.
Okay. So that's fine. And I don't like people always confuse these. So I'm just going to go back here and hopefully this will help. Just as a reminder, because these are often very confused. And maybe it's a pet peeve of mine, and maybe it's because I've seen like UNFPA put out a theory of change that has outputs in the wrong spot. But just as a reminder, maybe I probably should have actually had this up when I was asking all of you to do this. But the output is more the completed work. It's that you did something, right? So in terms of the Binti Yetu program, it would be that, for example, that you held the trainings with the girls with their parents. And then the outcome is hopefully, and this is why we measure later, that they do have improved knowledge, that they do have improved access, that sort of thing. The output is, it's literally just a tick. It's like, we did it. We don't know if it had any impact at all. Maybe it utterly flopped. Maybe I did this webinar with all of you and you didn't take anything away from it. Nothing has changed. You didn't gain any knowledge. But I did it. Mama Hope, we did it. Okay, so does that make a little bit more sense in terms of your examples, Charles? You can just give a thumbs up as well if you want.
Yes. Thanks.
Okay, great. I know it's also the end of the day for you. So
yeah.
Yeah.
There's
So that's
also,
fine. Not sorry, go ahead.
There's also a question from Dr. Kili.
Great. And I'm just going to say thanks for that example, Charles, because it is always mixed up. So this was a good way to talk about that again. All right, next question.
You can unmute yourself, Dr. Kili. Yeah.
Hello, Jane.
Hey.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Yeah, we appreciate that. And so a quick question about the MEL. Do we conduct them together, or it should go as it is read there? MEL, MEL. We start with monitoring and then evaluation and then learning, or we can take them together, the three of them. Or can we start with learning and then we evaluate and we monitor? Should we go with this sequence?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you. Ideally, they're all happening sort of together. At the beginning, you're having part of your evaluation in terms of doing a baseline. The monitoring happens throughout the project. Again, ideally, and from that monitoring and constantly checking things you're learning, hopefully, and things are feeding back where they're supposed to go and throughout the organization and the team. And then sort of at the end or after the end, you have your bigger evaluation from which you learn as well. But ideally, they're all sort of happening throughout the life of a project, which is and that's where it's often there's not a lot of budget for it, but a midterm evaluation can be very useful, because if you are going very off track for whatever reason, and this isn't me saying that off track is bad, like sometimes your assumption is faulty, sometimes things change, sometimes what you're doing is having effects that you didn't anticipate. Just if you're going off track from what you planned and what you said you do, and it's achieving something different, if you're, especially in a longer, bigger project, if you have a midterm sort of evaluation, you can catch that and redirect. So again, ideally, I get that the ideal of it versus the actual implementation can be very, very, very different. But ideally, you know, you're learning as you're going along, and, you know, the data that you're collecting, it's feeding back to the decisions that you're making and the next things that you're deciding in the life of the project or the organization. So they ideally, again, are happening sort of all together. Evaluation is sort of more a chunk. It's like beginning, end, maybe middle, maybe not. But yeah, they're not, I don't think they're completely separate. And there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of data you can collect through monitoring that can be used in the evaluation as well, and sort of a final report. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, sure. It makes sense. Thank you for your response. And I was thinking the same, that learning could be anywhere. In the course of monitoring, you learn something.
Absolutely.
Even
absolutely.
evaluate, you can learn some significant. Yeah, sure. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And building in those sort of feedback loops where, you know, you're sharing those learnings with the whole team becomes very, very important as well. Because the learning is nothing if you don't act on it. All right, I see another question. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Jen. I would, I like the way how simple you have actually made it look like in terms of output and outcome. I just want to get it clear. Let me just use this example if we can. If this example is going to make it even simpler. For example, in an education program, the goal would be X number of children are retained and complete formal education. An activity would be payment of school fees. So in my understanding, output would be X number of students supported with school fees. In my understanding, that would be an output. And then the outcome would be X number of students that are retained and complete formal education. I don't know whether that one can actually help us simplify it much. I just want to get it right. So these are two terms that have really struggled for sure. And I think the way you've actually put it is a very simple. I don't know whether that example is, I wanted to use that example at least just to make it easier for me to understand and even put it for all other programs that we have.
Yeah, no, and they are very often confused. And I think it's very important to understand the difference between them, because they're not the same. But your example is correct. So if part of your program is to provide school fees, the output is that school fees are provided. That doesn't mean they're used, right? It just means your program did what you said it was going to do. You provided them. And then what happens, hopefully, is that the students do go to school. It does reduce dropout as a result of not having school fees. It does improve school outcomes. And so those would be your different outcomes. But your output, yeah, you're absolutely correct. Program wants to cover school fees for X students. Output is school fees for X students is paid, is delivered, however that is happening.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anything else from anyone? Or do we all have to go now?
I think we can wind up now. Oh, I see Tobias has raised his hand.
Great.
Yes, you can unmute.
Jen, thank you very much, Vincent. I just have one comment, is that usually we keep on trying to make our monitoring and evaluation and the learning plans within each program that we prepare. I would request, because I felt this presentation was really so good in highlighting is especially what we need to address under monitoring and evaluation, monitoring, learning, and evaluation. So I would request Jen, if possible, is there a way you could share with us the presentation? Because the way it is, it was a very summarized format, so that we can
Yes.
use it for continuous reference.
Yeah, I think it will be made available. Vincent can tell me if
Yes,
I'm wrong.
yes, we shall. And actually,
Okay.
we also okay. But first of all, I'm going to update them later as we come to the end of the session. But yeah.
Yeah. So it will be in some form, and you're right, it was very condensed. Normally I do this over a longer period of time and give people more time to, work through everything as well. So this was a lot of information in a short amount of time. Okay, anything else from anyone, or are we at the end?
I think we are at the end.
So
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
not at this point. Well done, everyone. I know this was a lot of information. And again, a lot of it is now homework for you. And you thought you were done with school. Oops.
Yes. Yeah, and I'd like to thank everyone. Let me turn on my camera. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and thank Jen for this valuable session. I'd just like to let partners know that we have another session similar to this, a part 2 of these, and there are certain documents or things that I'd sent an email asking you to send to Jen. If possible, please send to her. And I'm going to follow up with the recording and the presentation, the deck. We're going to communicate the time we're going to have the second part of this series. Jen is still going to be our facilitator, so at least now you've interacted with her and you know what to expect. So
I'll be back.
Yeah, she's not gone. She's going to be back again. So I hope you all enjoyed the session. Kindly share with me any feedback. Wamboy is going to draft a short feedback kind of document for you to fill out and let us know how we can improve and what you got to get from the webinar today. So thank you all. I wish you a great day for Ingrid. I've seen Ingrid here, and Ingrid was saying that they are at an important point in developing their M&E. So I hope you really got to learn something, and we encourage you to send the documents that we asked for so that Jen can be able to support you in any way. So thank you all. I wish you all a great evening for my East African friends and a great day for my Guatemalan friends. So see ya until next time.
Bye, everyone. Till next time.